My parents' lawyer thought he was delivering a death sentence to my dignity when he slid that single manila folder across the mahogany table. 2 years of absolute silence. 2 years of being erased, slandered, and labeled mentally unstable by my own flesh and blood. And it all came down to a single piece of paper. The attorney sat back, his expression grave, waiting for me to break down or beg. But as my eyes scanned the legal terms, a sound escaped my throat that he definitely wasn't expecting. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I burst out laughing so hard and so loud that the lawyer actually jumped in a seat, his face turning pale as he nervously asked if I was okay. They thought they had finally found a way to destroy me, but they had just handed me the ultimate victory. Follow my story until the end to see how the tables turned. My name is Chloe, and at 26 years old, I finally learned that blood doesn't make you family, it just makes you related. For as long as I can remember, my household operated under a strict, unwritten rule. My sister, Vanessa, was a royal princess who could do no wrong, and I was the seasonal worker who existed only to serve her court. If Vanessa wanted the bigger bedroom, it was hers. If she crashed her car, our parents bought her a brand new luxury sedan the next morning while blaming the traffic lights. But my breaking point, the moment the illusion completely shattered, happened on the day of my university graduation. I had worked late-night shifts for 4 straight years to graduate top of my class with a degree in finance. On the morning of the ceremony, my cap and gown were pressed, and 2 seats were reserved for my parents. An hour before the event, my mother called me. Her voice didn't carry an ounce of regret as she said, "Chloe, honey, we can't make it. Vanessa forgot to book her flight for her weekend trip to Cabo, so your father and I have to drive her to the airport 3 hours away." They skipped the biggest milestone of my young life to act as an airport shuttle service for my sister's vacation. When I met Mark, a brilliant, hardworking mechanical engineer who loved me for exactly who I was, I thought my parents might finally show some respect. Instead, during our first family dinner, my father looked at Mark's modest background and openly called him a financial downgrade, right to his face, claiming I was throwing my life away on a peasant. That was the final straw. I looked at my parents, looked at Vanessa's smug smile, and realized I was completely done. That dinner was the exact moment I chose myself over the people who were supposed to love me. I took Mark's hand, walked out of that restaurant, and blocked every single one of their phone numbers before we even reached the car. I went completely no contact. No texts, no holiday visits, no life updates. I needed peace, and more than that, I needed to protect my new marriage from their poison. But my parents and Vanessa couldn't handle losing control over me. To justify my sudden disappearance to the rest of the world, they launched a vicious, calculated smear campaign. Within weeks, rumors began trickling back to me through distant cousins and old childhood friends. My mother had been calling everyone in our extended social circle, weeping corporate-quality tears, claiming that I had suffered a severe emotional breakdown. They told the aunts, the uncles, and even our old neighbors that I had become mentally unstable, completely detached from reality, and that Mark was an opportunistic manipulator who was keeping me hostage from my loving family. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. They painted themselves as the grieving, heartbroken parents dealing with a crazy daughter, all to protect their flawless public image. For 2 long years, the silence from my end was absolute, but the emotional weight was staggering. Every holiday that passed was a reminder that my own flesh and blood preferred to destroy my reputation rather than look in the mirror and admit their own cruelty. I spent 24 months building a beautiful, quiet life with Mark, completely unaware that their lies were about to catch up with them. 2 years of absolute silence can do wonders for your peace of mind. Mark and I had built a stable, thriving life, and the memory of my family's toxic behavior had finally started to fade into background noise. But then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, the barrier I had built between my past and my present was violently breached. I received a formal delivery at my office, a legal summons from a high-profile corporate defense attorney named Arthur Vance. The letter stated, in cold, non-negotiable terms, that he represented my father and required an urgent, in-person meeting regarding a critical estate document that demanded my immediate signature. Anxiety hit me like a physical blow. After 24 months of being dead to them, why was a corporate lawyer suddenly tracking me down? My mind raced through every terrible possibility. Were they trying to sue me? Were they trying to legally lock me away using the mentally unstable narrative they had spent years spreading? The next day, my knees shook as I walked into the cold, intimidating law firm in downtown. The office was a monument to old money and unearned power, filled with polished mahogany and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It was exactly the kind of place my father used to flex his financial muscles. Arthur Vance sat behind his massive desk, his expression grave and unreadable. He didn't offer a warm greeting or condolences for the 2 lost years. Instead, he simply looked at me, slid a single, heavy manila folder across the smooth wooden surface, and said, "Your father was very clear about this, Chloe. You need to sign this today." The silence in that room was heavy enough to crush a weaker version of me. I stared at the folder for a long moment before finally pulling out the single document hidden inside. I expected a lawsuit, a restraining order, or maybe some cruel legal maneuver to officially strip me of my family name. But as my eyes scanned the legal jargon, the real story began to unfold between the lines. This wasn't an attack. It was a desperate, disguised surrender. The document was a conditional inheritance release and debt assumption clause. As I read further, the puzzle pieces fell into place. Over the last 2 years, my father had handed over the complete operational control of his multi-million-dollar logistics company to his golden child, Vanessa. Predictably, her reckless management, lavish personal spending on the company credit card, and absolute lack of business sense had driven the empire straight into a brick wall. They were facing catastrophic supply chain defaults and a massive, looming bank foreclosure. Because I was still legally listed as a founding minority shareholder from an account my grandfather had set up for me as a child, the bank refused to approve an emergency corporate bailout loan without my explicit signature. My parents were drowning in millions of dollars of toxic debt, and because they had ruined their own credit, they desperately needed my pristine financial record and signature to save themselves from total bankruptcy. The document basically stated that if I signed over my rights and assumed co-liability for the new corporate loan, they would promise me a tiny, insulting fraction of future inheritance once the business recovered. They were entirely trapped by their own arrogance, and I held the only key to their survival. The absolute absurdity of the situation hit me all at once. I read the final paragraph, and a sound escaped my throat that completely shattered the quiet dignity of that corporate office. I burst out laughing. It wasn't a polite chuckle. It was a loud, echoing, uncontrollable laugh that came straight from my stomach. The lawyer, Arthur Vance, froze. He sat back in his leather chair, his face twisting into a mix of shock and pure bewilderment. He nervously cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and asked, "Chloe, are you okay? Do you understand the gravity of what you are reading?" I wiped a tear from my eye, leaned forward, and looked him dead in the face. "Oh, I understand perfectly, Mr. Vance," I said, my voice dripping with absolute irony. "For 2 years, my parents have told everyone who would listen that I am completely insane and mentally unstable. And now, their entire multi-million-dollar empire is collapsing because of their favorite child, and who do they crawl to? They send a high-priced lawyer to beg for the signature of their crazy daughter." The attorney opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His confident, intimidating facade completely dissolved as he realized I wasn't the weak, desperate girl my father had described to him. The sheer panic behind this urgent meeting became crystal clear. They didn't want to bring me back into the family. They wanted to use me as a human shield to absorb their financial ruin. They thought they could manipulate my guilt, but their greed had finally made them stupid. The lawyer sat frozen as I slid the unsigned document back across the mahogany table. They expected me to either sign out of fear or walk away in anger, but they completely forgot that I graduated top of my class in finance. I wasn't going to just walk away and let them find another loophole. Thanks to Mark's sharp technical skills, we had spent the last 2 years quietly keeping tabs on public financial registries, and I knew exactly how deep my father's company had sunk. "Tell my father that I am rejecting this contract entirely," I said, leaning back with a calm smile. But while you're at it, remind him of the corporate bylaws established by my grandfather when the company was founded. Arthur Vance shifted uncomfortably, the color draining from his face, as he realized I knew the rules better than he did. According to those original bylaws, as a minority shareholder, I had the legal right to demand a full, independent forensic audit of the company's books if the majority leadership engaged in reckless financial endangerment. Vanessa's lavish personal spending on corporate accounts and her blatant mismanagement fell exactly under that definition. By sending me this document, they had inadvertently handed me the legal standing to force an open audit. If that audit went through, it wouldn't just stop the bank loan. It would expose my parents and Vanessa to personal liability and potential criminal fraud charges from their own creditors. I told the lawyer he had exactly 24 hours to inform my parents that if they ever contacted me, smeared my name, or sent another legal threat again, I would trigger the audit and watch their entire empire crumble to the ground. They had set a trap for me, but they ended up locking themselves inside. True to his word, the lawyer must have delivered my message with terrifying speed, because the silence that followed was absolute. There were no frantic phone calls, no angry text messages, and no more tearful smear campaigns for my mother. Within a month, public business registries showed that my father had been forced to step down, and Vanessa was stripped of her executive title to appease the bank. They had to sell their luxury cars and downsize their home just to stay afloat, finally facing the harsh reality of the debt they had created. Meanwhile, Mark and I are thriving. Our independent life is filled with genuine love, security, and a deep peace that money can never buy. I am proud of the boundaries I set to protect my future. Now, I'm curious about you who are listening to my story. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have triggered the audit or walked away completely? Comment below, and make sure to tell me the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Thank you for watching until the very end.